All right, I don't see her yet. Well, we can start maybe with just running through, doing a quick roll call thing for each group. And hopefully by the time we're done with that, she'll have jumped on. So let's start, then we'll do the DAT members last. Let's start with the applicant team. So, this is the rescheduled Silver Spring DAT meeting from last week, and we are hearing 8676 Georgia as our only item today. So let's just DAT members and first of all, our applicant members in the room, say your name, and then online, and then we'll do the DAT members and the planning staff. Not too many of us here today. So.
I'm Ronnie Ali with Monster Harrison Architects.
I'm Daniel Seidman with Monster Harrison Architects.
Michael Catelli with Monster Harrison Architects.
Stacy Silver with Archero Brewer.
Mike Blair with Roadside.
Brian Bowman with Parker Rodriguez.
Brian Corcoran with Roadside. Paul Kaminski with Roadside.
Online, anybody else from the applicant group?
I'm Sarah Graham
Trina
with the
Rodriguez.
Wilkes Company.
Rodriguez with Parker Rodriguez.
Liz Rogers with Lurch Early.
Hi, everyone. Pat LeVay with MHG.
Bill Bonster, Bonster Harrison. App.
Okay, I think that's it. In terms of planning staff, I'm Atara. Everybody here already knows me.
Robert Cronenberg. Atul Sharma, good to see you all. Adam Bossi.
And online from planning.
So when you're coughing, they don't.
Stephanie Dickel, Down County.
Dan Bruckert, Historic Preservation.
Okay, I think
Elza Heisel McCoy, Chief, Down County Planning.
okay, and DAT members. So in the room,
David
yes,
Cronrath.
have David here, and who's online?
Hi, it's Alice Enns. Apologies for not being in person. I was hoping to be there today, but I have a sick daughter, so I miss out on the materials.
Morning, Raj Kasperkar.
Okay, great. And I still don't see Shajoy, but I think we do have 3 DAT members participating today, so that is good enough. I'm sure she's joining any minute. I just sent her an email, but I think we should.
I think I saw her.
Oh, did
Shaj-
you?
Yeah.
Shajoy, are you on the call?
She was on.
Shajo, you're muted if you're talking.
She just dropped, I think. Oh no, there she is.
Okay, maybe she's having issues connecting. Okay, because I have the list of people on the call here and I keep refreshing, but hopefully when she gets on, she'll let us know. But I think if she's having connection issues, then we should still sort of start with the presentation. I think everyone's very familiar with this project at this point, so if she comes in a little bit late, it'll be okay. So with that, I'll continue. Go ahead.
Thank you again for hosting us. We are looking forward to presenting our updated plan. This is actually our 4th time that's before DAP. We came before DAP twice with our sketch plan, and we came back to DAP in October for site plan. DAP members have provided us with some feedback, and we have materials that we had submitted and also some updated plans that we'll share with you based upon some additional feedback we got received during through staff's report. We also have gone before the Historic Preservation Commission. That I believe was in what was circulated. HPC has jurisdiction over the Historic Quincy Diner and basically the context in which it relates to the building. Their specific focus was on the context behind the Tasty Diner, and we'll talk a little bit more about that as well in terms of what HPC's recommendations were. I think Dan Bruckert is on the phone too, who can talk from HPC staff's perspective as well. So with that, I'll turn it over to the VHH.
Okay. So
I'm sorry, but before we start, I just want to clarify something. that Stacy just said, HPC does not have sole jurisdiction over that. So to the extent that that is all part of the project, the planning board and the DAP also have jurisdiction. Thank you.
Thank you, Elsa. And perhaps when we get to that part, we can talk a little bit further about kind of how those parts all come together in terms of making sure we have a consistent recommendation.
Okay, so for today's presentation, we're going to focus on the comments the DAP had for our previous submission, being mainly the George Avenue frontage, the building materials, and the garage facade behind the Tasty Diner. Go to the next slide. So this is just our existing site plan to refresh your memory. And then next slide, our proposed site plan, which also hasn't changed. And then this is our first floor plan. So at the DRC, we detailed why the retail elevators must be located at the George Avenue corner. So we'll describe that logic here and then move on to schemes for how it's going to look on the outside aesthetically. So the retail entrance is as close to George Avenue as possible, and the elevators and the retail entrance need to share the same vestibule for security reasons and for flow through the retail space. Elevators go from floors 1 to 3 to serve the retail. And then you go to the skip. So next slide, and then next slide. So this is the level 3 plan, and you can see our parking garage ramp curves up to level 4. That's to separate the retail and residential traffic. So the residential traffic can go straight up to level 4. And that creates a pinch point. So the only spot the elevators can sit and share that vestibule is in that corner next to the George Avenue facade. And we looked at a lot of different ways of ramping and putting elevators, and this is the only way to not affect the retail, garage, or building functionality. Next slide. Next slide. So this is the scheme A, which we submitted with our DAP submission of how we're treating the George Avenue facade. So the overall design approach to the George Avenue corner is to make this element a vertical beacon that will be visible from far down George Avenue and draw attention to the ground floor retail and be a marker that leads people down the block to the open space near the Tasty Diner. And to achieve this goal, we continued our gridded window wall facade on the tower portion of the building through the base into the ground. And at the ground floor and through the parking floors on level 7, we're using frosted glass, which we brought some samples here to create a glowing box in the evening to kind of highlight this corner and activate the street at night. And we have a dynamic glass and metal canopy that flares out on the bottom and marks the retail entrance. And at the building top, the tower is capped by an illuminated band that clearly and simply tops the modern gridded tower and draws the eye around the profile of the building. And you can see in this view that the inset balconies on the Cameron's facade stop before the top grid band. So there's a continuous grid across the top of the building and also down the corner on the Georgia side. So that marks the edge of the building at the top. Then in scheme A, we're using this frosted glass to create a glowing corner and with a shadow box behind it, so it's backlit. And go next slide. So here we're looking closer in, looking down Cameron Street and George Avenue. Next slide. So here you can see our canopy sticking out and creating a dynamic corner and drawing you into the retail entrance on Cameron Street. Next slide. Okay, so we've got some initial feedback on this. So we wanted to respond to DAP's concerns about transparency and creating a special moment at George Avenue. So this is scheme B for how we're treating the George Avenue corner. And so the differences here are from floor 7, so the top of the garage and the base, down. We've thinned the metal bands at the corner, and we've added transparent glass. So that's going to be a much glassier corner than we had it previously. And we've also added color LED light sticks in a geometric pattern that illuminate the corner and mark this as a primary building corner in Silver Spring. Next slide. So the lights in the geometric pattern will be able to change colors and have a dynamic shape that points down to the corner and marks the retail entrance. Next slide. So here's a view of the lights and the illuminated canopy working together. Next slide. Here's a view from looking on from Georgia Avenue, and you can, with the transparent glass, you can see past the elevators into the retail vestibule. Next slide. And here from Cameron Street, showing the lights on the facade and the canopy that wraps over to the retail entry. Next slide. And then for scheme C, we built upon the previous scheme. So the bands in the level 7 and below, the metal bands are thinned also. And the glass is also transparent. And we've added the LED light sticks in line with the mullions on the windows and on the corner of the building. So it reinforces the grid, which ties it to the rest of the building. And yeah, we've clad the elevator in a sculptural way, so it stands as a sculptural object and creates a unique moment inside this transparent glass corner. So really making it the special object in there rather than something we have to work around.
Can you point that out? I don't read this image. Where are the elevators?
The elevator is in that orange mass.
So doesn't the elevator go all the way up to the 7th floor?
No. The elevator goes from floors 1 to 3 with an override on level 4.
They're the dedicated elevators for the.
Just for good.
Just for
Yeah. So next slide. So here you can see it, and it tapers down to level 1. So it has to create as much visibility on the ground floor as possible while keeping the elevators where they are. Here's a view from Georgia Avenue showing the lighting on the corner and lighting above to reinforce the shape. And the shape of the elevator object is defined by the box it's in and also relates to the canopy that sticks out from below it. Next slide. And here's the view from Cameron Street. Then here, when you enter the retail entrance, you can see that the object reveals itself to be the elevator entrance when you walk into the retail. Okay, so I think we can pause here for discussion on the Georgia Avenue facade.
I just have another question, which I don't, maybe you can. So can you tell us more about the formal response between the corner element that you're describing and the rest of the building along Georgia Avenue? Is there an offset as there is along Camera?
An offset from what?
The facade or the plane of the corner element?
Yes, so the elevator element you're discussing?
So you have a corner element, right?
Yeah.
That's what you've been discussing.
Yes.
Correct. And that has two surfaces, one along Georgia and one along Camera, right? How do those surfaces meet the rest of the building?
Okay, so those surfaces, if you go back a few slides, or
yep,
or here.
So notice on the right, if you go where you were the last before you, can we go back
on Cameron Street?
Next one.
Yeah, next one.
You see on Cameron Street how you've articulated the difference, and the building actually steps forward and makes the corner recess. Is that same detail along Georgia Avenue?
On Georgia Avenue, if you go to the other slide. No, because the brick face is not on Georgia Avenue. So that's a continuous face, but the garage facade steps back into those metal bays.
But in the corner, at the very end, you can see that there is a recess on above that level.
Yeah, so above the parking garage, the building is pushed back.
So
yeah, I understand that.
So this is all one plane, if that's what we're looking at.
Or yeah, so the primary metal bands are in one plane, but the faces are pushed in, not on the corner.
Great, thank you. I just couldn't understand from your drawings. That's why I had
Okay.
to ask those questions.
I actually would recommend that finish your presentation and then we'll be able to go back and discuss each point, because I don't want us to get into a deep discussion that loses us. We
Yeah.
don't, we have to rush through.
All right, fair enough.
So just keep going, we'll come back. to
Okay,
it.
that's all right.
Yes, 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 but
Understand.
they had
Yeah.
asked to pause here and I'm worried about pausing. So
Okay, no, I
questions are great.
understood. Okay,
Can I,
next.
can I just ask one clarifying question before we move on? Did we look at 3 different scenarios then for that corner treatment?
Yes.
Or just 2? Okay, all right, keep going. I just wanted to, and we can jump back to that later, but let's go through the rest of the presentation. Thanks.
So, all right, so the next item is going to be about materials. So we've brought materials here. And so on the east tower, so left side of this drawing, we're going to be using this dark bronze metal, and that's going to be the same metal. It's going to be an accent for the rest of the building. So in the garage and on the west tower in the bays will be that metal.
Could you just pass this around?
Yeah.
The glass too. I want to see that.
Yeah, and that's the frosted glass at the corner.
And the brick.
Yeah, and then for the base, we're using this brick. Which you can see in this image is that same brick and that same metal color. Used on the example building.
What's the brick? Could you just tell us what it is? So the name, the manufacturer and the color.
Yeah, it's Potomac Valley Brick and Supply Company.
Yeah, I know them. Mhm.
Taylor Vanderbilt's. Alice, this brick is actually at our City Ridge project. If you've toured
Okay.
it, this is the front building, and that's a thin brick inlaid in a precast.
Yeah.
Okay.
You do have experience with a very similar condition
Yeah.
to what was
But so it's Potomac Valley. What's the brick color? Just
It's Vanderbilt Light.
okay. Thank you. Perfect. Thanks.
Yeah, and can you go back to the previous slide? And then on the west tower, the white tower, that's going to be a contrasting beige material, likely metal and likely in a patterned way to give it a texture and bands.
So that, again, could you elaborate on that? What is the pattern? How are you detailing it?
Yeah, so the pattern will be in thin bands, like 18 inches tall strips, all the way up the building. So you'll read it as bands and have it, and from a distance, it'll look like it's a masonry or a stack.
Horizontal
Bands are
reveal.
still revealed
Should
over
it
there as well.
Recessed reveal between?
Yes.
Recessed reveal.
Yes.
Yeah.
Not some piece of molding that's stuck
No,
on.
no, it'll be a recess reveal on that.
Okay, so that's the material. Yep, go to the next one. So these are HPC approval letters. So our last HPC meeting, we presented our treatment of the wall behind the Tasty Diner. And the HPC decided that the darker color, contrasting with the diner, and the horizontal fenestration that relates to the diner's ribbon windows, help preserve the diner's historic character. Next slide. So given the HPC's comments and approval, we did add thicker vertical members on the facade behind the diner to give its openings a rhythm and break the facade vertically to respond to previous comments at that meeting. And this piece of the garage floats above the recessed glass of the lobby below and breaks the corner of the building where there's a terrace and lower rise buildings to the west. The metal material of the garage with a sculptured angle facade help lighten the mass and allow it to float and span over this corner. The horizontal breakdown of the lobby and angle facade and masonry. So the horizontal breakdown of the lobby, the angle facade, and then the masonry above. Also visually break down the height at this point of the building where pedestrians most engage with it at the entrance and where the Tasty Diner is. And the horizontality of the openings relates to the historic openings on the Tasty Diner with the ribbon windows. And we believe if we thicken the verticals anymore on this portion, it will greatly increase the visual weight of it and it will cease to float. And it will be more in line with the brick next to it, which is pretty heavy. Okay, and then next slide. So this is the view from Ramsey, showing how the facade is bookended on both sides. And then a view from the entry looking towards the Tasty Diner, showing the mast floating above. And then a view from behind the diner car at Ramsey. Yeah, with the connector piece that's as minimal as possible.
I'm just gonna go back one slide, just,
Yeah.
I think we talked about this last time, but that was an element that DAP members had mentioned, but also HPC of pulling back the area that was floating so that it was less heavy and
Yep.
also did not go over the historic.
Yes, right. Yeah, it doesn't go over the historic.
Yeah.
Yep. And
So just one question, and
yeah.
Where is the dark metal and there's the lighter metal panels on the building?
Yeah, can we get it to the whole building? Yeah, so the darker metal is going to be on the left side on the east tower and also in the bays and as the window trim on the west tower.
And the openings at the garage.
Yeah, the openings
So
at the garage.
it's gonna be one with the dark metal is gonna be.
Oh, you guys just go up to the point, 'cause I think it's.
Yeah, exactly.
I understand what's being
Yeah,
asked.
no, that's fair.
I didn't think until today I understood that.
Yeah, so this whole
Light
tower,
colored tower is light metal panel and not the same brick as the base. Okay.
so the dark metal will be this whole tower, including the windows. This and the windows on this tower will be the dark metal, along with the bands on these bays. And then in the bays, the dark metal color will be in the crash walls and on this facade. And then the light metal panel will be this whole tower.
On all three
And the
sides.
brick is the base, the light.
And then the brick is the whole base.
So the tower on Georgia is predominantly the dark metal.
Yes.
Yes.
So does the brick come down to the ground at all? Or is it all metal
No,
on
the
the
brick comes
street?
down to the ground,
Ronnie.
centered on Cameron Street and on Ramsey.
Yeah, the brick, so for the
Cameron?
brick comes down right around the
Okay.
residential entrance along the
Uh-huh.
middle. And then also as it turns the corner on Ramsey. So those two locations kind of bookending the
Okay,
floating facade over the,
but not on Georgia.
not on Georgia.
It's metal on
No,
Georgia
those-
going
yeah,
on
so
the right.
down from the tower there.
I think the garage.
Yeah,
one
metal
shows
on
that.
glass.
And what's the material right behind Tasty Diner? I'm looking at the slide 22, I think the next one just, it's a light color background. Yeah, what's that?
So
Behind
behind the Tasty Diner is gonna be a full glass wall. And that's gonna be the
Right.
I
lobby.
see,
And
I see.
And that, so we have the lobby behind here and then the retail space behind the Tasty Diner.
we do have a glass sample. if you want.
Yeah, and we brought a glass sample too, so that's gonna be the clear glass. And
And the
these,
bronze colored panels is the one, that's the dark one. I'm just trying to make sure I'm,
yes, yeah, so that's the dark color.
okay. Thank you.
As you can see the brick coming down here, and also.
Mhm. And then around the corner, yeah.
Yeah, as you can see.
Mhm.
And what's the, do you know what the profile of these metal fins is, the primary ones and the secondary ones that you added, like, what are we, is it 2 inches, 4 inches, like, what is?
Those are pretty big, like 8 inches.
Those
For the big
big
ones.
The big ones.
And
Yeah.
In depth, they're about 4 inches wide.
4 inches wide, yeah.
So 4 wide, 8 deep, and then the smaller ones are what?
Smaller ones are
2x4.
2x4.
Yeah.
I
Just
wanna-
point out, these are nominal dimensions.
Yeah.
Just humor me, they're standard die sizes with different window manufacturers, so.
No, we just
For-
want
for the
to get a
representation,
sense of
exactly, that's what
Yes.
how much shade and shadow. they're
Yeah,
gonna
no, I appreciate that. I bought custom dies before and I'd rather not do it again.
I just want to get the scale.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay. So, yeah, so that's what we had to present. This is just the building cap, which we presented at the previous staff meeting.
And do I understand that that the facade of the tall tower, as it faces the swimming pool and recreation area, goes to white metal?
It's the lighter one, I think.
Is that, or is that a rendering problem and it should be dark?
That should be dark. I think there's a lot of glare from the sun we're using to light the pool here.
That's important, right? So that reads as a dark tower.
Yeah.
Thank you. That's much better.
Oh, yeah, one more thing. So that's the next after here. So, and then on the back side of the building, so on Ramsey Street here, next to Mi Rancho, we have a blank facade on the property line here. So our,
Next to the ramp.
yeah, so next to the parking ramp on the inside. So the scheme here is to continue our frames that we have on the garage next to it. And then inside of them have a patterned brick that continues along that facade.
Visual part of it.
Yes, on the visible part of it before we hit the Verizon building. And then the back, like everything not in the frame will be a concrete, likely a stained concrete to match the color of the dark bronze.
And the lighting that you're proposing in this view, can you just talk a little bit about where, does it turn the corner for both the towers, just one tower, just so that?
So the lighting at the top will turn the corner for both towers, so we'll run along the cantilever where the pool is, and it'll run along the top of the building on the right side of it. We don't have the night rendering. All right, I think that's it.
Okay, thank you. So debt numbers. Now on to discussion.
Can we run through the three corner options? And then I also have a question. It's on page 17 of my packet. It's the Georgia Avenue view from the south on Georgia Avenue. So I guess if we could start with my first, before we run through the different light options, do you have page 17 that's in our packets? The view from the south on Georgia Avenue.
Yeah, I think we moved it to the back of our presentation.
Because I'm just trying to understand the planes on Georgia Avenue and what's grounding, and it almost looks like there's two different masses on Georgia. I can share my screen also. Oh, there it is. Yeah.
Yep.
Because this gets to some of David's questions earlier, and are there two different color metal panels there, and then are those balconies? It looks like there's two different planes. There's like a taller plane.
So we adjusted our slides for the presentation today. So right now, the design is to have it all one color metal panel for that whole tower along Georgia Avenue.
Okay.
So this is what we submitted and we adjusted it, but we didn't change this rendering for the new presentation.
So Dan, would you want to describe what, in terms of your three options, what has changed on this so that they understand like what the different options are that we're asking them to provide us some guidance on?
Okay, so from this side, from this view, the changes are all the metal panel is going to be the same dark bronze color. So we won't have two competing towers on George Avenue. It would be one continuous tower. And
So
then,
will there still be the break in planes that happens at the top of the building that we're seeing here? Or will it be one continuous tower?
we'll still have the break-in planes.
Okay, that's good. I think, just wanted to
Yeah,
clear
so
that up.
Massey
I'm
hasn't
glad
changed,
that there is
just the-
still the break in plane. Okay,
Yeah, just the color. And then the
Okay.
corner options just concern that corner from level 7 below, which is from the base to the ground. So in this view, we're showing the frosted glass, and the other options, we have the clear glass with the lighting.
okay.
Could I ask
Alright.
another clarifying question? And do you mind if I go up and point to it?
Oh,
Because I
okay.
think it's easier than me trying to explain it.
Yes.
And for those of us on screen, if you could use the mouse to point to what David's pointing to,
Yeah,
it would
I'll do
it would
that,
be much appreciated. Thank you.
There's a plane change between here and here.
Yes.
Correct. Is there a plane change between here and here?
There is not.
There's not.
So this plane comes all the way down.
That plane, so.
Yes, sir.
Yes and no, yeah.
So-
Ronnie, maybe you can point us at.
So this plane that goes all the way up is all one, and then this is all in the same plane as that. These three are pushed.
This is in the same plane as that.
Yes,
Okay. And this is out in this plane, and this is pushed back.
yes,
Is that right? All the way down?
well, these two are pushed back, I think, yeah, that one's pushed back. All of them are pushed back, yes.
I think page 18 helps to answer the question. I think part of the reason we're hung up on this is because understanding how George Avenue grounds is a really and what's happening with the planes in that portion of the building is really important to sort of critique. Apologies. What's happening on that part of the building as we're talking about that corner light condition. So page 18 in the old package shows all of that sort of dark metal in the same plane grounding. So you can see around the gray building that's in the foreground a little bit better. But if you could also now walk through the three options on the corner one more time, the frosted glass version, and then, because I think I had a couple of clarifying questions there as well.
Okay, yeah, so this is the frosted glass version. So we have the frosted glass in all the planes just on this corner, going from the top of the base down to the ground. And at the ground, there'd be a possibility for having a retail signage or window show space there.
This is scheme B.
Yeah, then in scheme B, we have clear glass and then lighting in the glass in a geometric pattern.
And thinner mullion.
And thinner mullions, yes.
And what's happening in plan above the parking deck? So like levels 4 through 7 up there, what's going on in that portion of the plan? Is that the deck for the residential?
Yeah, so that's in the residential parking area. We're still programming that space. So we
How will it be programmed up there?
We're looking at it. Could be
Okay.
something for the residents to be used function. So it's not going to be storage or anything. So we're looking at it.
Okay.
Options.
Sorry, I keep interrupting. Just okay, so this is option B.
Yeah, but
Option B, and am I reading it correct that kind of light gray mass that's behind the clear glass, is that the elevators?
Yes.
Yes.
You're right. So,
And it doesn't go all the way up to
Right.
the top of the glass because it stops just for the retail.
the height is the elevator itself and the override.
I understand, yeah.
Yep.
So the programming piece that you're talking about is above that, where the gray box stops, and that's where you're exploring what could potentially be in that corner.
Right,
Yeah,
the top two floors.
yeah,
You
the
get to
top
see
two.
that. This is the option.
Yeah, so this is the third option with the thin metal bands, then lights along the mullions in the corner, and then the elevator clad in a more sculptural way to make it an object for the first floors of that glass box.
And also in a sculpture way, but also the angles relating to the canopy and the corner of the building.
I can give you my comments, if
Yes, go
that's all
ahead.
right. So first of all, I want to congratulate you on doing a very good job of dealing with the historic diner. I think your efforts to frame that in plan are quite successful. I also want to congratulate you in including some brick on the ground floor where it does exist. That's really a strong thing. It's not often in the contemporary world that we see brick in such developments. And so it's very nice. It's a little unfortunate that the Georgia facade doesn't have the same strength as the Cameron Street facade. My comment is really quite broad because I think you're still struggling with the two aspects that were mentioned at the last meeting that I was unable to attend. And so I'll put it this way to you. I think you're caught in a very curious and not very comfortable way between two strategies here. One is collaging the facades, and the other one is developing a wrapper. And the problem with your not resolving this strategy becomes apparent at the two corners. This corner, which we've been struggling to try and understand, and then the parking garage corner at Ramsey and Cameron. I think those are the two things that, to me, still haven't found good resolution. And in this case, I really applaud what you're trying to do, giving us those alternatives. And if I had to pick, I would say that I prefer B with thin metal pieces over A and C. However, that being said, I think the fact that this element can't articulate itself independently from the rest of the surfaces on Georgia is a weakness, because it doesn't clearly develop the strategy that you're pursuing of making a collage of elements that harmoniously come together. And so I find it a little odd and not very rewarding that the surfaces continue along Georgia Avenue and there isn't some kind of break between the corner element and the rest of it. In addition, if I had my druthers, I'd prefer to see some brick on that facade as well for that element, not the corner element, but for the rest of the building. If we go back to the other corner, which is at Cameron and Ramsey, I think that articulation of the parking garage with the sloped surface still is not very comforting to me, because the parking garage continues up and the sloping surface that you created just arbitrarily stops at some point. And so there's no real consistency, and it becomes, to me, something of a kind of decorative motif, which I don't find very satisfying, and would prefer that there be some kind of interrelationship between how you develop plans and how those plans are given expression both formally. And so I'm still, I feel compromised by the way in which you haven't resolved these things yet. And the same comments that I think my colleagues made at the last meeting still seem to hold, although your emphasis and efforts to develop the corner at Georgia and Cameron, I applaud. You're going in the right direction. I think it's getting better. And I'll stop there.
Raj or Shadra, if you guys have anything.
Yeah, hi, this is Raj. I well, I mean, I think David's articulated so well that I'm like trying to, kind of piggyback on what he said. I was as you guys were talking about, I just like pulled up my Google map just to kind of and got that little guy on the street, just to see like that corner at from Georgia and Cameron. And again, I really do appreciate, I think this has come way like long way on this comment about, so I think it's a great response on the specific comment on like giving that corner like prominence, especially with everything that's around it. This is like a new construction tower going up, so I applaud the effort that's being done here. But again, and again, it's so hard because it's such a small facade on Georgia and how you get to it, but it's just like feels like a lot going on. And it's trying to, I feel like, merge the historic like trying to give Tasty the importance of like how you're treating that facade along Cameron and Ramsey, and then trying to maintain that modern facade or like prominence on Georgia. It feels a little bit disconnected. And but I mean, I think I'll let David and Alice and the architects kind of lead that charge and how that's done design wise. But for me as a developer and just as a resident, my biggest problem I have is still that garage treatment, facade treatment behind Tasty. It is just, I understand the move from the mesh to the panel, but it's like, I mean, I walk that street and to have that overhang and it looks so dark and so severe, it's scary. I mean, and again, like I said, I walk that to go to Mi Rancho. So I walk that to go to Cubano. So I have that 3D experience of walking on that street, and I'm just very unhappy with that garage facade. I just think it's so overwhelming. It's like, yeah, so I don't know. Again, like I said, I'll leave it to David and Alice if they have any ideas on the design of it, but it is, yeah, so those are my really two big comments. Thank you.
I'll go ahead and jump in then. I think that, well, I'll start with the Georgia facade. I know this is a really challenging site, and because of that, we can't get the door on Georgia into the retail because of the grade and the ramp and how those elevators are working. So I appreciate the effort to look at a couple of different solutions here. I think I would go with scheme B or C that provides the opportunity for transparency to be able to see into those spaces. And hopefully there is something programmed on Georgia Avenue. This stretch feels a little bit dead right now. And I think right across the street on the other side of Georgia, there's the rehab that's happening. And so for all of those folks that are going into on that side, you want to, have a complementary active facade here on Georgia Avenue. It's very small. I know the setback is awkward with that existing building and where your property lines are. So whatever we can do to create transparency and light, and I think it's heading in the right direction here. But to some of David's comments about this facade, the potential for brick, and I think the language that was developed to screen the garage on Cameron Street is much stronger than this piece right here that has the ramp behind it and everything that's happening. So if there's any way that could, wrap for those two bays, so you see some of that brick and has that more sort of vertical opening, you can't see in quite so much, and then keeping that corner as transparent as possible so that you can see even people getting off and on the elevator in those lobby spaces, so it does feel like it's engaging with the street. I mean, those are my recommendations as this is moving forward, since it seems like we're kind of locked in with those elevators where they are on this tight site. So those are a couple of my comments here, and on this facade is like really to try to engage with the public realm, and it just, and it's also sort of the renderings. It just feels very, I know you were showing them in the evening so that we can see the lighting of it, but it feels very dark and sort of closed off from the street in this image that we're looking at. But I think it's heading in the right direction. And then as far as the Tasty Diner site, I appreciate the removal of the mesh. I think that's helped. And I just think even going from the dark metal to a light metal, so it doesn't feel like it's crashing down on the Tasty Diner. I know the historic folks have said they like the contrast, but I just think, to Praja's point, that it feels like that's a very big mass floating over this tiny piece. And if it's going to be this sort of separate articulated garage, is there a way that it can be lighter so it doesn't feel so heavy? I'm looking at the rendering on my screen right now. And there it looks very reflective, but the reality of it is that's a bronze metal, so it'll feel pretty dark. And when you look at some of the other renderings, it feels pretty heavy. And I do think the top of the building is looking good in the development of that. So those pieces, I think, are moving in the right direction in the articulation of the different towers. Now that there are there's no longer two different colors, I think that massing move is an important one to keep on the Georgia facade. But the articulation from the different angles, I appreciate those views, and it seems like all of that development is headed in the right direction. So it's really trying to figure out these ground plane corners, as David and Praj have highlighted already, I think.
Atara, I see that Shajoy has
Yeah,
her
yeah.
hand up, but I wanted to just make sure, I know that it's 11:45. I want to make sure we have an opportunity for some discussion to get some clarity, that there's definitely a disconnect on the area above Tasty with HPC. And I just want to make sure we have time to get clarity.
So
before we
I'll let Shadra comment, and then actually I would like, to that point, since Dan is on the call, I'd like him to reiterate for everybody where HPC's purview is with regard to this project, and how we should take their comments on the building that's not part of the diner. So Shadra, you're up first, and then
I do agree with a lot of panelists' comments regarding the colors of the panels. In this rendering, it does look lighter. It looks less overwhelming. So I think it's headed towards the right direction. But in reality, it's, as Alice already said, it's brown snow. We don't know how dark it's gonna look. And I wonder if we can go to the ground plane, because I saw that we have a few really nice ground plane renderings illustrating the grading in landscape and pavement for Tasty Diner. And just go to the plan, please.
It's at the end.
Oh, that's the end. Because in my file,
There's an large map plan with the grading towards the end.
it's like page 26.
Keep going.
One more.
Keep going forward. Keep going.
There.
Yep. So, maybe Trini can have some explain some of the grades here.
Yeah, I can do it. This is Brian Bullock from Rodriguez.
Yeah, go ahead, Brian.
So yeah, I think this was a request from you all last time to give you some more information on it. So as you can see on the right side of the page, the residential lobby is at 348.40, and what we're doing along the frontage here is we're trying to mitigate grade so that we can have a flush entry at the diner. The diner entrance is at 345.83, so it's roughly 3 feet or so. And grade change we're trying to mitigate. What we did do previous,
Yeah, start a date, start a start date. Well, and that's what he asked for the start date. Like, I think it was September, but is this October?
We lost you.
Dated October. I was like,
no,
oh,
you didn't.
yeah, so that's why.
Someone was talking in the background.
Oh, I'm sorry, that's me, Carmen.
So what we did do since you last saw us, we did try to provide some more porosity into the space by adding this stair in the middle to access where we would hope to program dining, and retail seating in the plaza sector. And then we have a seat wall, a low wall on the right-hand side that acts as a retaining wall to mitigate all those grades.
So my question would be, what's the paving materials in? Because we talk about a lot of colors, you know, the colors of the panels above, and then the colors of the Tasty Diner. How do we use a pavement color to really, I don't know, complement or alleviate some of the darker colors we already have in the facade?
Yeah, we've been looking at both, you know, precast concrete pavers or potentially stone. We haven't landed exactly on that yet, but we're thinking in a warm gray, something that is a little bit lighter but has some warmth to it, to kind of make it a more inviting ground plane down there.
And the pink color there is a public art piece, right? On the right in the larger planter.
Yeah, there's a potential, I think, visual amenity, which could be a art piece or something else.
Sculptural element, yeah. And one thing on the pattern, as you can see, there's the streetscape standard, which is a wider module, and then a much more intricate pattern in the sort of semi-private and private areas. The colors will complement each other.
Is that like a Hanover type of a paver, you think, or?
Potentially.
Yeah. Those are pretty nice.
They have hundreds of finishes and different options to choose from.
Yeah.
Not like an
And I think
option.
we'll spend some
Optional
time.
thing, she's like, no. And
Yeah, sorry, I was gonna say, we'll spend some time sort of kind of coordinating with the final choices of colors for the architecture as well as the diner to really kind of create a complementary palette.
Thank you.
right.
That will be helpful.
So to just sort of get to narrowing the decisions here, I think that's really important. This is our fourth kind of meeting here. It sounds like, generally speaking, that one of the big things that was an outline question was the elevators. And just want to make sure that we have some consensus around that so we can move past that. And it sounds like the way the elevators are located now and all the discussion around the constraints of the grades and things like that, that the DAP members would be okay with the elevators remaining in the same place, even though the skin of the building is still being kind of discussed. And I just want to make sure if that is everybody's agreement, then we kind of document it and ensure that the applicant knows that that is a resolved portion of this discussion, because I think that has a impact on everything else as well.
I'm okay with that.
I'm okay with it. I think it's unfortunate, but I'm okay with it. With the treatments that have been presented, if we can work with those and try to create as much transparency and activation on that corner as possible.
It seems to me that if you develop the corner as an element that as you're trying to do, and you make that element separate and discrete from the wrapper of the rest of the ground floor, I think you're on to something that's more successful. When that doesn't have that discontinuity, I think it becomes confusing and hurts the streetscape. And so I think the more similar the wrapping from the 7th floor down can be the same in terms of brick and the way in which you treat the openings. And then the corner element distinguishes itself as separate and distinct. I think you're on to something that is very, handles a lot of the issues about how the building reads at the street level.
And so in the plan view, really it's sort of discerning that top bay from the bottom 2 bays along Georgia Avenue, I think is what's been recommended here, and exploring the use of brick. Also think that, if I remember correctly, the Verizon building is brick on that corner too, so there might be some adjacency there that works. And then the big question that still, I think, Stacy, you want to talk about is the garage facade and make sure we at least have a consensus on that. Did Dan is this a good time for Dan to?
Yes, because actually we're gonna have to make a decision about whether we're voting today, and Raj has a hard stop at noon, as I think other people do. So let's, Dan, if you can give us one line, reminder about HPC's role here and how to interpret the comments in their letter generally.
Sure. So HPC has 2 roles. One is specifically related to the historic area work permit, which is required. And that involves everything that actually touches the diner building anywhere. So that's hardscaping, landscaping, new construction that physically touches it is absolutely a permit requirement. Now, they also have an advisory role for the planning board when it comes to other impacts on and around historic resources. And that's sort of where they came up with, there are basically 3 takeaways from the last preliminary consultation back in November. And they said that the revised hardscaping improves the functionality of the space around the diner, that the reduction in the massing of the pedestal helps to improve the sense of the new construction looming over the diner. So they thought that that was a reduction. And then the last bullet point was that the darker color of the building behind the diner helps to draw a contrast between the historic building and the new construction and allows the diner to stand out more. So those were their 3 takeaways. And they recommended, or the HPC voted that they issue a letter in support of the project to the planning board, which I think Stacy incorporated into the presentation. And I don't know if that clarifies or confuses the issue, because they've got, they're both have a regulatory component, but also an advisory component.
Well, to cut to the chase here, Dan, so that there's clarity, I think we just need to solve this. Is the HPC's comments on the facade intended to be of the regulatory nature or the advisory nature? I think we just need to have that discussion.
So, the HPC felt that the view shed behind the diner was a significant component, and they continued to feel that they were going to provide the planning board with their position on that. But as as a feature, it wasn't they weren't going to deny a historic area work permit for things that were behind and above the building.
Okay. Thanks for clarifying that.
Yes, I think for us, we just need, I think obviously from the design intent, our design team kind of has worked hard in terms of figuring that out. And I think, as they mentioned, they feel like that element kind of has been pulled back and has in effect, it's been designed in a way that is floating, is kind of an element that makes it less heavy. I know there's kind of differences of opinion on that. So we may need to have some discussion on that. But I think the other part is just the color is, I think we're hearing 2 different things here. We're hearing from HPC, they want to contrast us. They've kind of been very consistent in that, of a contrast between what's behind and the diner. And then we're hearing kind of the reverse here, that they want it lighter. So we really need some direction.
To Dan's point, they're responding to what they see, but it is an advisory comment because it's about the facade of the building, and they'll provide those comments to the board, but the DAP has to vote to move this project forward. Otherwise, you can't move forward with your final presentation to the board. So the DAP is where we've already received the final site plan submission for this project, and it would be at the end of March, the board date. And we have to sort of decide today, now, particularly because people have to leave at noon, whether the DAP has to decide if they're ready to give them the go-ahead that says, okay, we're satisfied with this to the point we've come. If you vote to move ahead, that means the DAP does not see the project again before it goes to the planning board for the final approval. That's sort of it. Or they can vote to have the project come back. There is one more DAP scheduled in February that would still allow the project to meet their current schedule for the planning board without requesting an extension. That is scheduled for February 19th right now. That's the calendar date for the DAP. So,
well, and just to, in the spirit of trying to find solutions here so we can get to the finish line, if the HPC's desire is to have a contrast, it doesn't mean that the panels have to be dark to achieve that contrast. The diner has, from what I remember, is sort of these warm tones of orange and red and some, a lot of aluminum and things like that. So if there's a lighter panel that still is different enough from that, maybe that's a way to thread the needle here. So you get the contrast that the HPC is looking for, but that looming mass is not a dark tone. I'm just trying to, really trying to get here to some solution.
And that may be something we can work on, we can get that direction from DAP, and then something we can work on with you all in terms of what that would look like. That would be potentially a way in which to continue to move it forward too.
I just point out that because the parking garage cantilevers out from the glass facade, you'll have some shadow there, and that shadow will create a darkness that provides the contrast that I think the historic people are talking about. In addition to what my colleague said about, you already have a contrast. The differences between the forms and the materials, but no matter what color you choose, will create that.
Diner cab will stand out from the building. And with this design, which we have all agreed is a great treatment for the diner cab and a great way to differentiate it and highlight it. So I think that is something that we've been in agreement with for some time here. So I need to force us to move to that next step because I don't want to hold people up and we need all the DAP members. I'm here and we're at time. So it's up to the DAP members, the 4 people who can vote as to say whether we would need to see this project one more time before they go to their final planning board approval, or if you are satisfied and feel like you've ready to send them off without another review. So that's.
And that review can happen within the project schedule. I just want to make sure that's not gonna.
So next, we have one more. They're currently slated for 2 months from today, actually, at the board, I believe. And so if we meet again on February, if the DAP decides they want to see it one more time, and that happens on February 19th, it's still enough time to make it to March 27th without, it should be enough time for applicant and staff to get everything together. I think if we have to go past that, then no, then they would need to make extension requests and things like that.
So Tara, can I ask a question?
Yes.
So if the applicant addresses the panelist comments and staff review them instead of them coming back one more time, would that be an option?
Yeah, the staff, the regulatory staff continues to review the project with the applicant up until the time they go to the board, and their comments are due. We still have more time in that review period, and they take the DAP comments into account. So that is something to know. But the DAP, sort of the way the design guidelines are written, and the way this was approved at the board, is that the DAP has to feel that this project meets the design excellence charge. And if they vote to say that it does, then it's saying that what we've seen here, the DAP is sort of confident that they don't need to see the project again. And you sort of have to vote. So you have to sort of vote yes or yes, we're fine, go ahead, or no, we're not fine, come back in February. That's the every time we meet, we have to have a vote at the end of the meeting as to where the status of the project is.
I guess my question, to rephrase my question, if the applicant addresses come up with the design that I mean, if we provide enough directions for the applicant to address all the comments, do we need to see it again? I guess that's the question.
Well,
I
that's-
personally think it's very close, and I don't feel like we need to see it again. That's my
So that's the
preference.
question at hand, is whether the panel needs to see it again, or they say, no, we feel it achieves the design excellence goals we've identified. And so we can make a vote, with, I guess, with conditions. I think that's something that.
Can we do that?
Stephanie
Vote
can
with
explain that.
conditions.
If you feel that staff sort of saying the DAP says, yes, go ahead, but we need these things to be met, and staff would have to ensure that those are met, that's something that can be.
If the DAP wants to go in that direction, I think there should be a very clear list
Yes.
that you give the applicant, and the applicant feels comfortable enough to comply with that list, because then if we are the proxy of reviewing the project, then we're just gonna go by the list and say, yep, they did all this, it's good, or no, they didn't do it, in which case we'll say, we gotta go back to the DAP. The other way to do it is you go to the February meeting, we all look at it, and we are getting closer and closer, and you get the approval, then you have HPC approval, you have the DAP approval, there's no like question marks hanging in the air. So really, it's up to the DAP to decide it. That's not our decision. We are happy to work either way, but I think you guys should.
So I'm sorry, Gab, I really have to go. There are people waiting for me, but I would like to see it again. I'm not in good conscience with the way it is right now. I can just say I'm very comfortable with it. But again, I will leave it to Alice and David on the design thing. But like I said, I looked at the background of where the tasty is. It's all glass behind either way. So this whole contrast thing, I get it, but I'm more worried about the users or the future users of this building. So I'm still not satisfied with that garage treatment.
Okay, thank you, Raj.
Thanks. Bye, guys.
Yeah, I recorded that. Thank you.
So I would say that the corner of Georgia and Cameron, you are working very hard to resolve it in a positive way. What I'm more concerned about is the development of the other end of the building and the way in which that parking garage facade is being developed. I mean, I have major questions about that, and I don't think I can. It's not my role to tell you what to do. I just would say that it seems arbitrary and decorative rather than actually trying to attack some problems, the way in which you're dealing with it to date. And that would lead me to want to see that again. And either explain to me why it's not arbitrary or make some changes.
Especially those two bays beyond the corner where next to the garage.
I'm talking about the sloped surfaces of the parking garage.
With all due respect, I'm struggling with this process now. We've litigated the angles for the better part of a year and a half now, and for the park and planning staff, I'm getting frankly frustrated with the disjointedness of our process, and I'm trying to understand what the path forward is. Because the angularity above the streetcar was as part of our preliminary site plan approval. We presented, I don't know, 10 different options. So while I truly appreciate the comments, right? Like, has that ship sailed? Right? And some of these are kind of rhetorical, but I'm sitting here wondering what to respond to be honest, right?
Right.
Um,
We have the massing. I mean, I think we've discussed massing. I guess the question that I think we all are struggling with is what is as you were trying to find a tool, like, what are we coming back with? Like, the building is kind of very far advanced at this point. Are we talking about materials in terms of coloring? Is that what you're looking for us to come back with? I mean, if we do come back, we want to make sure it's crystal clear.
Yeah.
What it is that you're asking.
That's exactly what we want to get to as well.
Isn't
So
it-
let me try to shed some.
Before, we only haven't heard from Alice yet in terms of DAP members, so I
Yeah.
would like to hear from her first, and then I think we can.
Yeah, that
resolve
sounds good.
Okay,
That sounds
Alice,
good.
go ahead. I want to make sure we record. all the time.
Okay, and I'll try to shed some light on sort of clarity for next steps from my perspective. I think it's very close. I do think it's worth coming back one more time in February, the 19th. And what I would really like to see are, I think, just a change in color on the piece that we were, sorry, I'm looking at it on my screen. The part above the Tasty Diner, and then from Georgia Avenue in Cameron, elevation drawings of those two with a selected corner scheme, so we can see how the elevations are really working at the street. That's what I'm most concerned about, is how the building is grounding, and it's a little hard to tell. I know that the views today were very helpful to understand the corner and the work that has been done there, but it's just trying to understand exactly what's happening in the building on the corner, and how to some of our the response to some of our comments about the corner piece and the relationship to the street. So those are the two things that I would like to see. And I think the elevation will also help understand exactly what's happening, because you lose some of it in the views.
Else, are you looking for full building elevation on Cameron on Georgia, or partial elevation showing relationship to the ground?
It's understanding the relationship to the ground, and really like for the base of the building, and how the architecture is wrapping that corner, because it's a little hard to tell from the views really what's happening and what the materiality is. We spent a lot of time trying to understand that today, and I think just a simple elevation drawing, at least for me, is very helpful to understand that a little better.
Brian, do you want to?
I just want to, the metal behind the Tasty. I hear everyone's comments. For clarity, that same metal is proposed at the garage, at the dominant, face of the east tower. It is, and I'm not an architect. There's architects in this room that can probably articulate it a lot better than I can, but it is a forming element across the project. So, candidly, there's kind of two trains of thought, right? One is you could lighten the metal behind the Tasty and create now another element. We've worked incredibly hard over the last 6 months to simplify and create a more elegant design across the site. The site shape itself creates a lot of compounding problems when you start to work into the architecture and drive aisles and functioning parking, plates and residential floor plates. And that was some of the original stuff we came to you guys on, with some latitude in our development to be able to accommodate the unique shape of the site. So, going back to the color, one is you could have a new element, right? A new color that we've already gotten HPC's approval on. Or we have to look at what that color does to the balance of the building, right? If you want to continue to use that color as a uniforming element that ties, these conceptually two towers together with the podium, base, that has further reaching effects. And, I sit here not confident or comfortable that I can commit to running that to ground in the next 2.5 weeks before a follow-up meeting. So, again, I'm kind of at a little bit of a loss with the process and some of the open-endedness here. And I kind of put that out there, like we can continue to try to run it to ground. And I understand that my comments here are kind of open-ended, but that's kind of where we're at.
I think Brian said it well. I mean, this color is actually unifying in terms of look at the whole building in massive. And I also, again, what he said is correct, is that introducing a different color will jump off more and, take away the uniformity of this architecture that we're trying to do here.
Yeah, listen, again, from my end, without saying yay or nay, I personally like the lighter or the darker. I'm just purely talking about from a process standpoint, that in order to meet March's hearing date, I'm not sure that this group and the other advisory groups are going to be able to reach a consensus.
So what I'd like to suggest in terms of process, this is Elsa. So I think, the panel has to find that this meets all of the requirements of exceptional design. And it's, it isn't a timed exercise, it's a pass fail. And so I think that we've lost a number of the DAP members due to time. I'm going to suggest that the staff can work with the DAP panel and come up with a specific list of things. And, I think we're hearing everything you're saying. I think there's frustration on both sides. I'm going to suggest we pick 1-2 things and send that to you. And that's what so I guess Alice, I've heard 2 members say that they want to see it again. I think it feels like in terms of whether the panel sees it again, it would be good to hear your thoughts on that. But I think we could provide specific direction, in the next day or so, and then come back to address those elements.
So also to your comment, we did that in Bethesda, DAP, come up with a list of items with conditions in the applicant submitted material for DAP to review. And if the DAP members all agreed upon the revised design, and we just approve it. I mean, we have precedent doing that. Not that I'm, pushing forward that, we should or should not see it again, but I'm just trying to find the most productive way for both sides.
Alice, do you have thoughts?
So what you're saying, Elsa, is that we would come up with a list and then we would see it not at a formal meeting, but it would just move.
I think if they could submit elevations, they could submit detailed drawings, and the panel could review the detailed drawings to address the specific issues, and could decide. It's the next opportunity to meet is a pretty quick turnaround, but the panel could decide to have this review based on the 3 items or whatever, without meeting again.
Okay. I think I would be comfortable with that. I know obviously I don't want to hold up the process. I don't think they're major items. And I know the parking deck piece has been an issue, sort of who has purview through the whole process. And so it's a tough one. But I want to just make sure that we are being responsible and there's not a big looming giant cantilevered heavy looking piece that is not pleasant to be experienced from the ground level. And so I appreciate, so I guess what I'm saying, Elsa, is that seems like that would be a solution that we could work with if we have a very clear path moving forward. And if Praj is no longer with us, which I know we just need to confirm with her that works.
Well, and also the panel would need to meet again to vote.
Mm-hmm.
So there wouldn't, the applicant wouldn't necessarily need to be there.
Okay.
So staff could say, you need to do these 3 things to be very specific. The applicant submits the materials, and then that's it. And the panel makes their vote at the next DAP based on that, and then we're done.
Then not everyone needs to come forward. I think that makes sense. That's fine.
And I would just say, if you are going to meet, I think that we'd rather be there if you're going to be voting. So we have an opportunity for, discussion.
I guess I just have one more sort of final question. And I think we've really honed in on 2 issues, if I may. And I'm not sure, and maybe in my sort of very black and white background, less shades of gray. If I'm hearing this correctly, right, like the DAP endorses a standard of design excellence for the totality of this project. And I can't help but wonder if we're focusing on 2 items, which as important as they may be, we're losing sight of the forest for 2 specific trees. And I would ask everybody to look at the totality of what we've done. And I do feel that it warrants, a recognition of design excellence, frankly, especially when you compare it to, other product in recent developments or candidly those in the pipeline in Silver Spring and in this neck of Silver Spring. And I can't help but think that we have met that standard. And while there may be some minor things that need to be continued to be resolved, I do question whether it rises to the point of a yes, no on a standard of excellence for purpose of endorsing it to the planning board. And that's kind of my final thought.
I mean, I'll just remind everybody that how this comes about is all based on the design guidelines document. The design guidelines in Silver Spring emphasize basically the same things we emphasize in Bethesda and other urban areas throughout the county. And I think the reason why the Georgia Avenue frontage is the thing that we were very hung up on is because it is Georgia Avenue and because that is going to be the primary experience of the building for the people who do not live there and who are not going to the Avenue. Because Cameron is not right now the main street in downtown Silver Spring. So I think that it's coming not just out of like what the DAP thinks, but also sort of the design guidelines direction. I just want to sort of, it's important to tie back to.
So
we do hear, so we I think we hear that perspective. Let us, because we're like almost a half an hour over time, let us send you 3 things. Atara and the team will circle this with the DAP and get you the list. You could submit the materials. You know, it was not to exclude you from the next meeting, but that it would be more like it would be an extended DAP discussion. So I think just so that we can wrap up, I think we hear you. Let us work on it and send you something, and we'll schedule the next meeting. Because we don't have a vote from the DAP, so the DAP has to meet next time anyway.
Correct. We do have agreement, I would say, just because he didn't say this out loud, David agreed with this path, so we've got 3 DAP members that are here agreeing with this path forward. That you
Okay.
So I think that's good.
So we are coming back on 2/19.
So we're going to send you a much more concise list than the comments have been in the past. Now we're down to 2 or 3 things. I'll say these are the only things we need to see, and then you do not need to send in like the application again and all the things on the list again, like you've been doing. You can just send the exhibits that speak to those. I think we all know the project well enough. And we'll see, perhaps we can even, since this is sort of like a bit of a different sort of DAP, perhaps we can even, since this is a late DAP and that's coming up soon, we can give you more time on that submission because everyone's so familiar with the project. Sending it to the DAP, you know, a little bit sooner. We won't need to have our memo, as much of a memo time. So I'll look into the timeline and give you guys as many extra days as we can to get that done.
One less clarifying question to Brian's point in terms of kind of direction when you guys are coming up with your 3 things is if you could think about it in context with the building, as Brian was mentioning, is, you know, that the color that we've been talking about is a unifying feature on the whole entire building. So this is a huge impact potentially. So just ask that when you're providing us that comment, you keep that in mind as well.
We get it.
Thank you.
Okay, yes, we've taken up a lot of people's time today. So thank you guys for coming and for all your hard work. And we'll be in touch as soon as we can. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you all. Thank you, David, for being our
That's
designator.
all. Yeah, thank you.
We appreciate it.
Very much.
Thank you all.
Thank you. I mean, it would help us.
Last. I'm sure it'll pop up here. Thank you.
Talk with David a little bit here, and I don't know if this is allowed or if you have time, but like that Georgia Avenue was one that we spent some time on, and I hear the comments about the brick kind of laughing over, but if I'm not mistaken, that was actually one of the schemes that we had previously shown. And with the incorporation of the balconies coming down that separated the corner from the other retail, it was thought by a variety of folks to have that metal panel sort of element come down to the ground. So, you know, you guys talk a different language than I do, but I do want to make sure, and I don't know, Daniel, if you guys have those on your computer, but you can show some of those earlier iterations now and sort of explain how and why we got to where we are. And may still be an opportunity to go back and revisit it, but there was conscious decisions made, you know.
Yeah. On the drawing, it gets back to your earlier comment. So we need to find the focus on the whole.
Yeah.
And how the parts articulate themselves to reinforce the whole. And that's where it's not coming through.
Yeah.
So I take your point very clearly, that you want us to look at it as a totality.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, the totality isn't devoid of its parts.
I'm with you.
And so when those parts, when you change one part and it's not consistent with the totality, then it falls apart very quickly.
Yep.
And that's the issue. You change one thing and it causes other
Exactly.
consequences, right?
Yep.
And so it's not just so simple as saying, oh, we'll keep everything the same and we'll just change this one element. And
Exactly.
somehow that all works
Yeah,
now.
no, I
It's
think
not
in some
it's
cases that
not
can
a
be a bigger failure.
simple additive process.
Exactly. No, I'm totally with you.
No, and we understand what you're saying about separating this corner out, making it its own thing.
Yeah.
And previously we did have brick on this side and it was just too small of a piece and too disconnected from that side on Cameron Street that it didn't really make sense and it couldn't wrap inside.
And that may very well be the case, but nonetheless, you didn't articulate it as a separate element relative to the other pieces on the left-hand side of that. There are many ways to do it. The trick is to not have a continuity between that corner element and the rest of what goes down Georgia Avenue. If you can't get the brick for other reasons, then okay. But I am unconvinced that what you've shown solves the issues. Right?
At this point, I think all the things you're gonna get are gonna be materials, right? So there's no like move the cantilever and like we're past that. I think we all recognize that. It's gonna be mostly materials. It's going to be a comment probably about this. So there's two bays being something else that's distinct. Recommendation was made to make them brick, so it's consistent with the Cameron side. There'll probably be a comment about the color of the panels.
Humor me, I'm hearing two different things. I'm hearing create a separate and distinct corner and potentially that material does remain, right? And now I'm hearing, you know, change that material. So
see, you're asking me to do something that I cannot do. I can't design it for your
Oh.
design team, right?
Yep.
So I have to see it. So someone has to make it so it can be seen. There are many ways to do it, right? So I think the key is that the corner piece, from my perspective, the corner piece has to be articulated in order to make it sensible. And so it has some readability. Now, once you do that, I don't know what the consequences are on the left-hand side of the building as you go down Georgia Avenue. And that's something that your architects have to investigate. I can't answer.
I understand, right? You have one potential solution to address David's comments, right? I guess, and that's what I was trying to.
I'm trying to
You're
find-
prioritizing a differentiation versus a materiality difference.
Yeah, and what I'm trying to do for your team,
understand.
Brian, is find the path of least resistance here. right?
Yeah.
So I think if we can do a couple of these things, we're good. And we've always worked with your team. We'll continue to work with your team. And I know like this is an iterative process. It can be frustrating. There's lots of cooks in the kitchen. We get that.
And with all due, it's not very iterative, right? Like this is why I would be remiss if I didn't say this. We have one DAP member who was able to join us. We brought materials, like it would have been, in my opinion, a lot more productive meeting. We've discussed last time about having some version of an offline conversation and work session in order to have some of these, you know, it's a very rigid 1 hour short window, and we're talking about a $200 million high rise. Like it's not getting the collaboration that it does deserve to come up with the best project.
That's where the regulatory stuff
Yeah.
and the design roles carry forward. those comes
We're
in.
trying to get there. I think we can, and we're happy to.
have
If you want to, after you get comments, reach out to us. I think
Yes,
we're happy
we're
to
happy
interpret it, at the end of the day, the DAP has to vote, so
Yeah.
we can't vote for the DAP.
Right, but we think we
Right, so-
understand where they're coming from and we can provide,
I
you
think
know.
You have a very
Side,
good
but
project.
I may be over.
Thank you.
You have a chance, you have a chance of getting an A+.
Okay, I'll take that,
Right?
you know?
And that's why it's important.
Yeah.
Because we all want you to get to an A+.
So listen, so
because
I want an A+,
I
you
know,
know?
because that will allow you to rent up the building
Exactly.
quicker and better, given all the other things out there.
Correct. Correct.
We look at that corner and we'll look at it again.